In this video, you'll learn how to composite entourage, that is, to reuse some of the extracted objects in another scene. Select Building and Sky, and then hold down the Command key on the Mac or the Control key in Windows, and click the car and people thumbnails. Then double-click on any one of these selected images in Bridge to open them all in Photoshop. Notice that they didn't have to go through Camera Raw because these are PSD files. Go to the Window menu and choose Arrange, Float All in Windows. And then drag these out of the way. Make this smaller by pressing Command minus or Control minus in Windows. Take the car from its document window and drag its layer thumbnail into Building and Sky. By default, this becomes part of the clipping group, which is not what we want. Hold down the Option or Alt key and position the cursor right in between these two layers and click. That makes this an independent layer. You can move it with the Move tool and then press Command or Control T to activate Free Transform. Hold down the Shift key to constrain the aspect ratio so that the width and the height scale together, and then drag this down. Now, it's a bit tricky to estimate the proper size based on this perspective, but do the best that you can, and click Commit. If the perspective isn't quite right, and it's close here but not perfect, you can convert this into a 3D postcard. Let's try that. Go to 3D, New Mesh from Layer, Postcard. Essentially what this does is it takes the image and puts it on a three-dimensional plane that you can then rotate. Do we want to switch to the 3D workspace? No. Use the Orbit tool up here to rotate the car, and you can see what's happening. I'm able to rotate it. I think I need to drag this up slightly to rotate the car just a wee bit so that its perspective more closely matches the perspective in this photo. And I might also need to reduce the size of it. I'll use the Slide 3D Object tool and drag that up to slide that away from us slightly. And then perhaps use this tool, drag the 3D object to relocate it. Go to People and switch to the Layers panel. Drag in the people and drop them here. Press Command or Control T to activate Free Transform. Hold down Shift and scale them smaller. And then position the cursor inside this window and drag to move them. So you have to estimate how big they would be. I think maybe the car is a little large still. I'll go to Car and make that smaller by sliding it further away from us. And then drag it into the right position in the square. It's a bit tricky to get this believable, but do your best to estimate that. And when you're satisfied, press M to go to the Marquee tool so that you get out of the 3D control. Now I think there's one other thing we could do to make this a bit more believable, and that is to adjust the saturation or the brightness on these objects. So let's do that first on the car. I'll use Brightness Contrast. So I'll click this icon. That adds an adjustment layer. If I decrease the brightness, it affects the whole image. I don't want that. Instead, I'm going to click this button to create a clipping group so that brightness contrast affects only the car layer. Then I can tone it down a bit. And similarly, I will go to the people layer and add a brightness contrast adjustment layer, make it a clipping group, and then decrease the brightness on the people a bit. It's a little bit more believable. So use these techniques to bring entourage into other projects and create composite images.